No one talks about Mason anymore. Not because they forgot him, but because something didn't want them to remember. It started with a soft sound, then a crack, then a student vanished, and then a mnemorist from class, from memories, from mirrors. Mason once said, "What lives under the floor isn't a monster. It doesn't roar, it doesn't claw, it whispers and waits." It was built from what we bury: forgotten memories, hidden fears, and empty spaces no one bothered to fill. It doesn't devour, it replaces. If you ever walk past the gym and feel the floor strangely warm, if your reflection no longer moves with your heartbeat, if someone asks, "Who's Mason?" and you're not sure such a person ever existed, then maybe it's already too late. Maybe you're not the one asking anymore. Maybe you're the one being asked about. Part 1. The faint thump. They said the gym floor was replaced 3 years ago, but no one ever explained why the old one had to be torn out in the middle of the night. Mason never thought much about it. He was a junior now, tall enough to touch the basketball rim on a good day, and the gym was just ... the gym. Sweaty, echoey, full of bouncing balls and tired teachers who cared more about roll call than whether you remembered to wear deodorant. But that Thursday, something felt different. PE was second period, right after algebra. Mason changed in the locker room like always, pulling on his faded grey t-shirt and shorts, earbuds still in. He didn't notice the faint sound at first. The gym was noisy, sneakers squeaking, people laughing, Coach Reynolds yelling about hustle. But then it came again, a thump, not loud, not even sharp, just a dull, muffled thud from underfoot, like someone had dropped a beanbag under the floor, or like a heartbeat. Mason paused at the free throw line, sneaker half twisting. He looked down, another thump. The floor trembled, just barely, like a shiver passed through the wood. He looked around. No one else noticed. Coach was too busy lecturing Kyle for pretending to sprain his ankle, and most of the class was already shooting baskets or gossiping by the bleachers. Mason took a step back. Nothing. He stepped forward. Again, thump. It was directly beneath him. He crouched down, pressing his palm to the polished floorboards. Warm. That was the first truly strange part. The gym floor should feel cool, especially in October, but this felt lived in, almost like the warmth of a breath trapped under thick blankets. "Yo, Mason." Kyle tossed a basketball his way. Mason caught it, startled. He forced a laugh, shook it off, and joined the game. He told himself it was nothing, a trick of acoustics. Maybe a busted vent under the floor, maybe. But the sound stayed with him. Later, in the cafeteria, Mason tried to explain it to his friend, Eli. "You ever hear something ... under the gym?" Eli was halfway through a burrito, like mice. "No, bigger, like ... knocking, but soft." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Dude, maybe the gym has a haunted sub-basement. Or mole people." Mason laughed, but it didn't sit right. Not because of what Eli said, because of the way Mason remembered the floor, how it had trembled. That night, he lay in bed, earbuds out, staring at the ceiling. The silence pressed in around him, and he imagined the thump again. Rhythmic, slow, like something breathing in the dark. Just below the floorboards, the next day, PE was cancelled. Mason didn't think much of it until he heard whispers in the hallway. Someone from the gym class had gone missing. Derek Chang, a girl whispered near her locker, didn't show up for fourth period. His mum called the school. Probably skipped, someone else said. No, he left his phone and backpack in the locker room. That made Mason stop. Derek had been playing dodgeball yesterday. Mason remembered him clearly. Red shorts, laughing too loudly. He had been near the bleachers, right where Mason had felt the thump. He tried not to think about it. But when he got to the gym that afternoon to pick up his water bottle, he saw it. A mark, not big, just a narrow line between two floorboards, slightly darker than the rest. Mason knelt, touched it. The floor was warm again. Then something happened. A tremor, barely there, but enough to make the water bottle roll a few inches. Mason stood up quickly, heart thudding. Coach Reynolds appeared behind him. Gym's closed. Mason, come back Monday. Yeah, sorry coach, just grabbing this. Coach stared at him a beat too long, then nodded. Be quick. As Mason left, he glanced. Back. Coach was still standing in the middle of the court. Looking down. By Monday, the rumors had grown. Some said Derek had run away. Others said he was expelled. But no one could explain the texts his friends had gotten that night. Just one message, sent to 4 people. I heard it too. That's all. No one had seen him since. Mason sat on the bleachers during homeroom, staring at the crack in the floor. It was still there. Maybe a little longer now. Almost like it had spread. Coach wasn't in that day. Neither were 3 other students from the gym class. No announcements, no explanations, just a growing warmth under the floor and that quiet, steady thump, like something waiting. Part 2. The crack in the wood. You wouldn't notice the crack unless you were looking for it. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Mason noticed it the following Wednesday. It had been 5 days since Derek disappeared. 5 days since. Mason felt the gym floor tremble beneath his sneakers. He hadn't told anyone else about that part, not even Eli. Part of him worried no one would believe him. The other part was scared someone would. He walked into the gym for 6th period study hall, which had been relocated there because of a leaky ceiling in the library. The gym was quieter than usual. No basketballs, no shouting, just scattered students, sitting in little clumps with Chromebooks and earbuds. The echo was different, without noise. Bigger, somehow. Like the room was holding its breath. Mason sat near the bleachers again. Same spot as last time. That's when he saw it. A thin hairline crack ran along the floor, just a few inches long. At first, he thought it was a scuff mark, but when he reached down to brush it, his fingers met a jagged edge. The wood was splitting. It wasn't big. It didn't need to be. The cracks seemed ... alive, like it hadn't been there yesterday, or even this morning. And when Mason pressed his palm against the floor, just beside the fracture, he felt it again, a vibration. Not steady, like from an air conditioner or nearby machinery. It was irregular, uneven, almost like something shifting. Breathing. He drew his hand back. Quickly, no one else noticed. Eli was across the gym, tapping on his laptop, half asleep. The other students barely looked up from their screens. Mason leaned in again, squinting. There was something inside the crack. At first he thought it was dust, or maybe gum wedged in the seam. But no, it was darker. It looked almost wet. A glimmer, like something slick had seeped up from below. He blinked. It was gone. Or maybe it never was. That night, Mason returned to the gym. He wasn't supposed to be there. But after his mom fell asleep in front of the TV, he slipped on a hoodie, grabbed his flashlight, and biked to school. The back door to the gym was never properly locked. It caught halfway, then bounced if you pushed hard enough. Mason had discovered that in 9th grade, inside, the gym was silent. The kind of silence that has weight to it, like it pushes against your ears. He stepped carefully, the flashlight beam darting across the bleachers, the scoreboard, the folded wrestling mats. Everything looked the same, except it wasn't. The crack was longer now. Mason walked slowly across the court. The floor creaked under him, but the crack didn't. It just existed. Quietly, calmly, like a waiting mouth, he knelt beside it. The beam of his flashlight trembled slightly as he brought it close. The crack had spread by at least a foot. The edges looked peeled back, like wood that had been pried up with fingers. And that dark shimmer, it was back. A low sound reached him. Not loud, more like pressure than noise. A hum without tone. It came from beneath. He leaned closer. The hum grew warmer. Then the floor twitched, just a little, but enough to make Mason fall backward, heart in his throat. He stared, waiting nothing. The gym remained still. The hum was gone. He stood, backing away, breath unsteady. Behind him, something creaked. He turned. The bleachers were the same. Nothing moved. Nothing followed. Mason left in a rush. The next morning, the crack was covered with yellow tape. Floor damage. Read a paper sign taped nearby. Stay clear. Coach Reynolds wasn't in again. Mason asked another teacher about it. She shrugged. Said the coach had taken some personal days. Eli joined him at lunch. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't, Mason said. I went back to the gym. Eli stopped chewing. Wait, are you serious? Mason nodded. Eli looked round, then leaned in. Okay, you remember last year, when the old janitor quit without warning? Mason vaguely remembered. Yeah, Bellamy, right, yeah. My brother said Bellamy told people he heard things under the floor, scratching, breathing. Said it got louder every year. Nobody believed him. They said he was just old, losing it. Mason felt cold all of a sudden. He pushed his tray away. Eli wasn't done, but get this. My brother said Bellamy tried to rip up the gym floor his last week, like with a crowbar. Said it had to be opened. Said it was growing. That's what he said. Mason swallowed. Then why didn't anyone do anything? Eli just shrugged. They replaced the floor, said it was termites. But Mason remembered the warmth, the shimmer, the sound, and the way the cracks seemed to pulse beneath his hand. Later that day, Mason passed the gym again. The tape was still there, but the crack, it had widened. Not by much, maybe half an inch, but enough to see something beneath. Not wood, not concrete, something darker, something that moved. Part 3, Locked Records. Said the janitor kept a master key behind the vending machine, and Mason didn't ask how he knew that. Some things were better left unexplained. It was Friday after school, a grey October afternoon with clouds like bruises, hanging low over the parking lot. Most of the kids had already gone home. A few were still in after-school clubs or waiting for rides, but the halls were mostly empty. The kind of quiet that made your footsteps sound louder than they should. Mason met Eli near the cafeteria. Both wore dark hoodies and carried backpacks. Not because they needed books, but because it made them look like they belonged. You sure about this? Eli asked, adjusting his sleeves nervously. You said you wanted answers. This is where they are, Mason replied. The door to the archive room was in the old wing. Past the guidance office, where the carpet turned into cracked linoleum and the lights flickered just a little more than normal. They found the vending machine. Eli knelt, reached behind it, and after a moment of scraping plastic and metal, pulled out a small worn key with a blue ribbon tied to it. "Told you," he said, a little too proud. The door to the archive room opened with a click and a groan. It smelled like old paper and mop water. The overhead light buzzed weakly but stayed on. Filing cabinets lined the walls. There were boxes stacked on metal shelves, some labeled in marker, others completely blank. Mason felt his stomach twist. Something about the place felt ... untouched, like time didn't move inside this room. "Start on the left," he whispered. They split up. Eli pulled open drawers labeled with graduation years. Mason scanned the boxes, his fingers trailing over dusty lids. One box, shoved behind a stack of others, was labeled simply 1976 Gymnasium Incidents. He pulled it out. The lid stuck for a second, then came loose with a puff of stale air. Inside were manila folders, faded and brittle. Each one had a name written in typewriter font. Aaron Don, Langston, Lisa M. Cho, Vincent. All had the same red stamped label at the top. Closed, no further action. Mason opened the first one. It was thin. Just a student photo, a couple of tardy slips, and a single report. Missing after gym class. Last seen entering locker room. Witnesses unconfirmed. He opened the next. Same pattern, same eerie brevity. Each student disappeared during or after PE class. "Eli," Mason called quietly. Eli joined him, reading over his shoulder. His face paled. "They're all from the same year," he muttered. "All from gym." Mason dug deeper into the box. At the bottom, under a loose flap of cardboard, was a file marked in red, "Confidential, do not diastrabayit." They hesitated. Then Mason opened it. Inside was a single typed memo, yellowed and fragile. October 29th, 1976, facility assessment concluded. Structural anomaly beneath gymnasium confirmed. Presence described as unclassified, potentially sentient. 5 student disappearances linked. Floor reinforced. No further excavation authorized. Status: buried and sealed. Neither spoke for a long time. Mason reread the last line. Buried and sealed. It sounded less like a repair order and more like a warning. The lights flickered. Eli jumped. "Okay, that's enough. Let's go." They packed the folders back as best they could, but Mason slipped the memo into his hoodie pocket. As they stepped into the hallway, Mason glanced back at the room. The door creaked slightly as it settled, almost like it sighed. Back in Mason's room that night, he laid the memo on his desk and stared at it. SENTIENT. The word echoed in his head. He remembered the hum beneath the floor, the warmth, the shimmer in the crack. The way it pulsed. Was it alive? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Do not dig. Do not wake it." Mason sat up straight. He looked out his window. The streetlight flickered. Then his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Eli.Bro. "Someone knocked on my window. I live on the 2nd floor." Mason didn't reply. He was already looking toward his own window, where a faint shadow moved just out of sight, and the floor beneath his desk was warm again. Part 4. The final PE class. The gym floor smelled sweeter that day, like sawdust, and something else Mason couldn't name. Something faint and wrong, like breath that had been trapped too long. Coach Weller was subbing for Coach Reynolds. who hadn't been seen since Monday. Nobody really asked why. Substitute teachers came and went like whispers in this school, and Weller looked like the kind of guy who took roll and sat down. Mason stood near the edge of the court, one foot bouncing the basketball slowly, his other planted squarely over the taped-off crack that was now barely visible, except he felt it still warm, still faintly humming. "All right, split into teams," Weller called half-heartedly. 10 minutes of warm-up, then scrimmage. Don't break anything. The class shuffled into motion. Sneakers squeaked. Basketballs thudded and bounced. Laughter echoed off the walls. Eli was on the other side of the court, waving Mason over. Mason stayed still, because something was wrong. At first, it was just a smudge, a dull streak near the free throw line, brownish faint, like a drag mark left by a dusty mop. Then another, near mid-court, then more a cluster of blotches that hadn't been there before. Mason would have noticed. He always noticed now. He walked closer. They weren't water stains. They weren't dust. They looked like smears, like fingerprints. Long dragged fingerprints, as if someone had pressed their hand into the floor from beneath .Mason, knelt and touched one. It felt dry, but when he pulled his hand away, his fingertips tingled. A low vibration, like a subwoofer turned low, thudded through the wood. He looked up. No one else had noticed. "Yo, Mason," Eli called. Mason looked back and nodded, but didn't move. Weller walked by, chewing gum and checking his phone. Mason pointed at the smears. "What is that?" Weller barely looked. "Old varnish. This floor's ancient. Just play." Mason frowned. He was sure it hadn't been there yesterday. Positive. He returned to the sideline and sat down. The smear near his foot seemed darker now. That was when he noticed something else. The smears had a pattern. Not random, they curved, almost like fingerprints. No, not fingerprints. Whorls, like a giant thumbprint, pressed into the wood, layer by layer. His chest tightened. He stood again, eyes scanning the floor, smear after smear, circle after circle, not damaged or impression. The gym was being marked. Mason took a shaky step back, then the whistle blew. Weller barked something about defense. The scrimmage began. Bodies moved, balls passed. Laughter and shouting drowned out the silence. But Mason didn't play. He watched the floor, and it watched back after class. The locker room was its usual mess of damp towels and locker slams. Mason changed quietly, stuffing his gym shirt into his backpack. Eli leaned over. "You okay?" Mason hesitated. "There were marks on the floor. You didn't see them." Eli shrugged. "Dude, I was guarding Tyler the whole time. I wasn't looking at the floor. They weren't just marks," Mason said. "They were ... shapes." Eli gave him a look. "You've got to chill, man. You're gonna spiral." But Mason didn't feel like he was spiraling. He felt like he was being pulled. That night, Mason sat at his desk, flipping through the photocopied memo again. The one that read "buried and sealed." He opened Google Maps and searched for the school's floor plans. Nothing detailed, just a rough outline. He clicked through archived news sites. He found an old PDF from 1978 about gym renovations. It mentioned something vague, reinforcement work completed following substructure shifts. No further access recommended. He zoomed in on the grainy scan. There, in a footnote scribbled by hand, original subfloor chamber inaccessible. Entry collapsed, 1976. Do not disturb. Subflor chamber. Mason leaned back, heart ticking like a metronome. Something was under the gym, and it was moving again. The next morning, the gym was closed. A sign on the door. Under maintenance, Mason asked Eli if he'd seen it. Eli shook his head. Must have happened overnight. Through the glass window, Mason saw the floor. The marks were gone, or scrubbed away, but something about the shine wasn't right. The floor looked too clean, polished like a mirror, and as he stared, Mason thought he saw his reflection ripple, not move, ripple. Like water, he blinked. Gone, gone. The door creaked. A janitor walked past with a mop and bucket, humming a tune that Mason couldn't place, but it felt familiar, like something he'd heard before. From beneath the floor. Part 5. Night whispers. Mason always thought schools felt weirder at night, like the walls could finally whisper after a whole day of keeping quiet. It was just after 11 p.m. when he slipped through the back door, the one behind the band room that didn't always lock right. His flashlight was tucked into his hoodie pocket, barely used. The moonlight pouring in through the high gym windows was enough to see Dot, enough to feel. He walked the hallway in socks, no shoes, no squeaking. Every step was deliberate, soft, like moving through someone else's house while they were asleep. His backpack thumped lightly against his back. Inside was the folded memo, buried and sealed. The school was silent, not just quiet silent, like everything was holding its breath. Mason turned the last corner and saw the gym doors. One of them was cracked open, just a sliver. He didn't remember it being that way. A chill ran through him, but he pushed it aside. He had to see it again. He had to feel it again. The warmth under the floor, the pulse, the whisper that wasn't sound, but sensation. He pushed the door open, and the darkness swallowed him. The gym looked the same, and yet it didn't. The moonlight stretched in stripes across the polished floor. The air smelled like wax and wood and something else, something sour, like breath exhaled too long ago. He stepped inside. The door groaned shut behind him. Mason took a breath, held it, let it go. His foot touched the floor, warm, still. He took another step, then another. Silence, then ... SCRRRRRCH ... A soft, dragging sound, like someone pulling cloth across the floor. Far away, near the bleachers. Mason froze. His hand hovered over his flashlight, but he didn't turn it on. He waited, listened. SCRRRRRCH ... Closer now. He took a slow step back. The floor creaked. The sound stopped. He held his breath. His heartbeat felt too loud, like it would echo off the walls. Then ... A breath, not his. A long, slow inhale. From the other side of the gym, he couldn't move. Then came the whisper. It didn't sound like words. Not at first. More like air brushing against skin, like syllables without shape. But he felt it against his arm, his neck, inside his chest. Mason, NNN ... It didn't echo, it pressed. Mason, NNN ... He stumbled back. His heel struck something softer, Matt, a jacket. He didn't look. The floor beneath him pulsed like a heartbeat. He turned on the flashlight. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then the beam hit the far side of the court, and Mason saw movement, a shape, low and crawling, slipping between the bleachers. It wasn't solid. It shimmered, like heat rising off pavement. Then it was gone, just ... gone. He backed toward the door, flashlight trembling in his grip. Then ... the floor whispered, not in words, in heat. His shoes, even through the rubber soles, picked up the vibration. He dropped. The light dot, it rolled, spun once, and stopped with the beam pointed down into a crack. The crack was back, and it was open, not wide, just enough to see something shift beneath it, something that glinted, moved. Mason bent down. He didn't know why. Curiosity, terror, they were the same now. He leaned closer. The whisper returned, louder, wet, full of breath. You hear me now, ... He snapped upright, grabbed the flashlight, turned and ran. Back home, Mason locked his bedroom door. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every now and then, he thought he heard something. A soft knock, a creak, a breath near his window. He held the memo in his hand, like it was a shield. But the words didn't help anymore. They only made it worse. Buried and sealed. He knew now it hadn't stayed buried, and something inside it wanted out. Or worse, ... it already was. Part 6. The staircase below. Mason didn't plan to go back. He told himself that, said it out loud, even more than once. But the gym was like a sore tooth. You couldn't help touching it. It was Saturday afternoon. The school was locked for the weekend, but Mason knew the janitor left the north wing window unlatched. He'd seen it once, when a volleyball got stuck on the roof and they had to sneak back in. Funny what you remember. He didn't tell Eli this time. This time felt different. The air was warmer inside the gym, still close, like the place had been holding its breath all night, waiting for him. The crack in the floor was gone, not repaired, just ... gone, vanished. The boards sat smooth and perfect, gleaming under filtered sunlight, like it had never been there, like none of it had happened. Mason stood still in the center of the court. No vibration, no warmth, just silence. He walked to the bleachers, the far corner where the shadows stayed longest, even when the sun was out. Something pulled at him there, a memory, maybe, or something older. He crouched there, beneath the last row. Hidden in the shadow, just behind the lowest bench, was a small, square outline in the wood, barely visible. Mason ran his fingers along it. The edge gave slightly, ATRAPDOR. It made no sound when he opened it, just a puff of stale, humid air that smelled like rust and something sweeter. Old paper, dried flowers, sweat. A narrow stairway led down. The steps were metal, old and blistered with rust, barely wider than his shoes. A metal railing lined the right side, but it wobbled when he touched it. He hesitated, then descended. The stairs groaned under his weight. Each step echoed, but strangely, the sound didn't bounce back like it should. It was swallowed, eaten. The air grew thicker, damp. The light from above thinned to threads. He reached the bottom. A hallway stretched forward, maybe 30 feet long, low-ceilinged and lined with concrete. But it wasn't empty. Names covered the walls, not painted, not written, etched, scratched, deep into the surface. Some crude and shaky, like done in a hurry. Others were neat, precise, all in straight rows. Mason stepped closer. Erin D. Langston, Lisa M. Cho, Vincent K. Marin. He knew the names from the file box from 1976. The missing students. He kept walking, name after name. Some he didn't recognize. Some looked newer, fresher. He reached a curve in the hallway. Just beyond it, the concrete dipped, and the wall glistened as if damp. Another name. Derek Changmason's breath caught. He turned, and there, on the wall behind him, fresh scratches. Not yet dusty. His name. Mason K. Holloway's knees went weak. He touched the letters, still warm, like someone had just finished carving them. Sound behind him, not footsteps, a whisper, soft, wet. Like lips brushing. Concrete.Mason. He turned slowly. Nothing, just the hall. Empty, but the air shifted, pressed the way it does before a storm. He backed away. The floor pulsed under him, faint but real, like a second heartbeat. The whisper came again. Mason. You're here. Finally. He turned and ran up the stairs. 2 at a time. The railing wobbled and snapped under his hand. But he didn't stop. He burst through the trapdoor into the light. Gasping, the gym was unchanged. Still, quiet, too quiet. The door behind him slowly clicked shut, though he hadn't touched it. Mason stood there for a full minute. Then, without looking back, he left. That night, he didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling until it blurred, and in the silence, he swore he could hear it again. The rusted whisper calling from beneath, from a wall lined with names, and one name still glowing warm. Past 7. The last name. Mason's toothbrush was gone. It wasn't just missing, it had vanished. From the cup by the sink where it had always stood next to his mum's. He checked the drawer, the floor, even the laundry basket. Nothing, just his mum's pink one, standing alone like it always had. When he asked her, she squinted at him, confused. You don't have one in there. That night, she bought a new toothbrush. Not for him, for a guest. Just in case, she said. But she never looked him in the eye when she handed it over. It was the first sign. The second came the next day. At school, Mason walked up to Nate by the lockers, same as always. He slapped the metal and said, "What's up, loser?" Nate looked at him, really looked like Mason had just spoken Greek. Do I know you?" Mason blinked. Very funny, but Nate's face didn't crack, didn't twitch. He just gave a tight, polite smile and walked off, like Mason was some random sophomore trying to make friends with a senior. The third sign was more subtle. Teachers stopped calling his name. Roll call came and went, and it was like he didn't exist. He raised his hand, and Ms. Talbot frowned. "You're not on the roster, sweetheart." "Yes, I am. Mason Holloway." She checked again, brows knitting. "Nope, you must be in the wrong class." He wasn't. That night, he opened his yearbook. From last year, he flipped through the pages, looking for his own face. It wasn't there. Group photos, he remembered them. PE. Science fair. Even the class trip to DC, he had stood next to Nate in that one. Both doing stupid peace signs, but in the photos, the gap between two kids was just that. A gap, like someone had photoshopped him out. Like he'd never been. He ran to the mirror. He was still here, still breathing, still blinking. His reflection stared back, a little too pale, maybe eyes wide with confusion, but he was real, wasn't he? That night, he didn't sleep. Every noise in the house felt closer, like the walls were breathing with him. In the early hours, he scribbled his name over and over again in his notebook. Mason K. Holloway. Mason K. Holloway. Mason K. Holloway. Trying to anchor himself, trying to stay. Then he remembered the wall. He didn't go back during the day. He waited for nightfall again. slipped out the back, hoodie pulled tight, flashlight clutched like a weapon. The gym loomed ahead, shadowy and still. He squeezed through the gap in the fence, tiptoed across the field, and slipped through the same unlocked side door. Under the bleachers, he found the trapdoor again. He pulled it open, the metal groaning like a voice remembering pain. Down the stairs, one step at a time. The flashlight flickered. The hallway below was just as he left it. Cold, damp. Still, he turned to the wall. Names, more names now. New ones. He ran his fingers across the surface, scanning there. Right where the moisture hadn't yet dulled the scratch marks. Mason K. Holloway, etched deep. Below it, just one word. Taken. His breath hitched. Something scurried in the dark. He backed away, flashlight trembling in his grip. As he turned to leave, he passed a stretch of wall where the names were almost fully faded. Barely legible, but he saw something strange. A name, the same name. Mason K. Holloway, but the date next to it, 1982. He felt the air change. Heavy, cold, electric. Whispers crawled along the walls. Not spoken, but remembered. Echoes of people who had been forgotten. Voices pressed against his thoughts like damp paper on skin. He was here before. He came again. He will be taken like the others. He ran. He didn't look back. When he got home, the front door was locked. His key didn't work. Through the window, he saw his mum, watching TV.com, happy. Next to her, on the couch, was a photo album. She flipped a page, smiling. The photos had no Mason in them. He banged on the door. She looked up, frowned, walked to the door. When she opened it, she tilted her head. "Can I help you, Mom?" She hesitated. "Are you a friend of Eli's?" "Eli, my son. I'm your son." "No, you're not." Mason backed away. She closed the door slowly. Click. He turned. The night air felt thinner, like he was being peeled back. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his notebook. The pages were blank. Only one remained. A scrap of torn paper. Eli Holloway. It was his handwriting. Part 8. The mirror in the wood. It started with a flicker, not of light, but of himself. Mason had gone into the woods behind the school, following a hunch he couldn't explain. The forest behind Briar Ridge High wasn't anything special, just a messy patch of trees, old soda cans, and half-buried secrets. But today, it felt aware. He hadn't planned to go far. Just a quick loop behind the gym, the spot where he used to meet friends after class. But something pulled him deeper, past the familiar logs and the rusted fence that bordered the old maintenance trail. That's where he saw it, a reflection, hovering, suspended mid-air, like a trick of light or a forgotten dream. There was no glass, no puddle, no surface to reflect anything. But there it was, Mason, standing where he stood, wearing what he wore, tilting his head with the same slow confusion. But the worst part, the reflection blinked first. Mason's stomach flipped. He rubbed his eyes, took a step back. The image didn't fade. Instead, it followed, not just mirroring, but mimicking. When he stepped left, it paused, then followed a half-second behind. As if learning, the air thickened. The kind of heavy that settles before a storm, pressing against your ribs like something's about to fall from the sky. Mason whispered, "What are you?" The reflection mouthed the same thing, perfectly. But there was a delay, a glitch, not a mirror, not anymore. He ran. Branches whipped his arms. His breath tore from his chest. Behind him, footsteps echoed, not overlapping his but chasing. Slower, heavier, measured. He burst out of the woods, shirt damp with sweat, chest burning. He didn't look back until he reached the side door of the school. Nothing, no one. For a moment he thought he'd imagined it all, until he got home. His bedroom door was ajar. His phone, always left charging on the right side of the desk, was on the left. A pair of shoes by the window weren't his. The window itself was open an inch. He never opened it. Mason sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding in the silence. Then the reflection showed up again, this time not in the woods, not in a mirror. In his dreams, it stood at the foot of his bed. Same clothes, same eyes, same scar above the brow from when he fell off his bike at 12. It didn't speak, it just watched. And in that strange, silent stare, Mason understood. Something, it wasn't trying to hurt him, it was waiting. Over the next few days, people started acting weird. His friend Josh didn't return his texts. In the hallway, teachers looked past him like he wasn't there. His reflection, the real one, started lagging behind. Just a second, then two. Once, it didn't follow at all. It stood still, watching. In the cafeteria, he heard a voice behind him say, "That's not him." He turned. No one there at home. His mom forgot he liked peanut butter and jelly. She called him Matt. His name was Mason. Each night, the reflection came closer. One dream, it reached out a hand. The next, it mouthed something he couldn't hear. On the fourth night, it smiled. Mason woke in sweat, not from fear, from cold. That morning, in the bathroom mirror, his reflection moved first, not a lag, a lead dot, and it didn't blink. He stepped back. It stepped forward. He whispered, "Stop," and the reflection grinned. Then it mouthed soon. He shattered the mirror. But when he looked down, the pieces didn't reflect the ceiling. They reflected trees, the woods. That night, he didn't sleep, but somewhere, beneath the floorboards or behind the walls, he heard footsteps pacing. Mason checked every door, every window, nothing. And yet, the silence was too silent. Like the house was holding its breath. At 3:03 a.m., his phone lit up. No number, just a message. "You left me in the woods. Now I'm coming home." The light bulb above his head flickered in the window glass. Behind his own silhouette, another stood. Identical, still, smiling. And when he turned around, there was no one there. Just the wind, or something that sounded a lot like it, whispering his name. Mason, Mason, soon. Part 9. Under the floorboards it started with a shiver, not from cold, but from something beneath his shoes. A vibration, like a breath exhaled from the ground. Mason had come back to the gym one last time. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was fear wearing a different mask. Either way, he couldn't stop thinking about the trapdoor, the stairs, the etched names, and the thing he hadn't quite seen, but had certainly felt breathing behind the stone. The gym stood in quiet disuse. No lights, just slices of moonlight filtering through high windows, cutting long shadows across the floorboards. He stepped onto the court, each footfall echoing a little too long. He was halfway across when it began. The floor jerked. He froze. For a second, he thought it might be his imagination, then it buckled again. A wooden crack, low and deep, like a groan from something ancient. He turned to run too late. The gym floor collapsed beneath him, wood splintered, air rushed up. And then he was falling through blackness and dust and a sound like the world, exhaling, and landed hard on something not quite solid, not quite soft. Silence. Silence. Mason blinked into darkness. It was so quiet, it screamed. The ground below him pulsed ever so faintly, not like concrete, not like earth. It was warm, breathing. When he pressed his hand down, it gave slightly, like skin stretched over bone. He stood, legs trembling. Above him, the hole he fell through had vanished. There was no ceiling, no gym, just endless black. And in that black, soft whispers flickered like embers. He turned slowly. There were walls, far off, curving in ways that hurt his eyes to follow, and etched into them millions of names, not scratched or carved, branded, names that glowed faintly, fading in and out like memories. He approached one, running his fingers over the surface. It read, Eli Tanner's. And then it changed. The letters rippled and reformed. Noah Low, another. Blink, Isabel Ross. Mason stumbled back. Every name he tried to focus on morphed before he could anchor it. He wasn't alone. From the far edges of the space, shadows swayed, not walking, not floating, but drifting. Like regrets that had learned how to move. They didn't speak. They didn't look. They just circled. In the center of the chamber stood something else. It wasn't a statue, though it stood still like one. It wasn't human, though it had the shape of one, tall, narrow, like a tree carved from smoke. Mason felt its attention before he saw it move. His thoughts went fuzzy, as if the thing were brushing its fingers through his memories. It had no face, no features at all. Really, just a void where a person should be. And yet he felt it smile. Around its feet, the ground rippled. Images bloomed, and died scenes from school, flashes of his childhood. Laughter in his mum's kitchen, the touch of rain on his neck last week. And then Mason saw something that stopped his breath, himself, but older, or younger, or just ... Wrong, another Mason, but hollowed, walking the school halls, laughing with his friends, being him only, without the weight of knowing, without the fear, without the shadow. Replacing him, the figure reached forward. Mason tried to run, but the ground clung to his feet, like it wanted him to stay. He screamed, but no sound came out. From above, faint echoes filtered down. Not voices, exactly. Remembrances, words once spoken, now stripped of their speakers, didn't. He used to sit next to me in math. Mason, who, weird, I don't remember that name. He was fading. The thing was taking his place in a final act of defiance. Mason reached into his pocket and pulled out the one thing he'd held onto his student ID. He stared at it, trying to ground himself. The photo, the barcode, the name, Mason Keller. He held it against his chest, closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the figure was gone. But something had changed. The walls were closer now, the whispers louder, and the names, they no longer shifted. He saw his name, fixed. Final, it burned quietly among the others. Above him, no hole, no exit. Just dark, but in the distance, a heartbeat. Not his, not human, but waiting and calling his name. Part 10. The final call. Sometimes it's not the voice you hear that chills you, it's the one that never needed to speak in the first place. The gym had gone silent, not quiet silent, the kind of silence that hums against your skin, fills your teeth with static, and makes the hair on your arms lift even when there's no breeze. Mason stood in the wreckage of West Pine High's gymnasium, alone and not alone. Beneath splintered beams and sagging lights that shouldn't still be flickering, but were, there was no clock, number ticking, no familiar echo of bouncing basketballs. Just the soft, steady whisper of something. It didn't come from outside. It came from inside. Inside the space. Inside him, he remembered falling. The wood had splintered under his feet like a rotting shell. He'd plunged downward, not hard, not fast, just far, through layers that weren't supposed to exist. Beneath the floorboards had been something deeper than dirt, something older than memory, and now he stood in it. A realm of shadows, fog, and echoing footfalls with no source. The walls weren't walls. They were feelings soft and formless yet dense as grief. He walked and saw glimpses, a locker swinging shut by itself, a voice calling, "Mason," from nowhere, a chalkboard covered in names, but none he recognized. In the middle of this vast, impossible expanse stood a structure, not a building, but a shape-shifting, pulsing like it breathed, built of whispers, fragments of memories, flickers of fear. It had no eyes, but it watched him. No limbs, but it stirred. Mason approached, and then it spoke. Not aloud, not even in words. It pressed meaning into his head, like fingers on wet clay. Thoughts that weren't his flooded in. "You've come far, Mason, but you didn't fall. You were called." He blinked. "What are you?" It didn't answer directly. Instead, the fog rippled with moments not scenes, but emotions. A girl crying, in a hallway, invisible to her classmates. A boy hiding in a janitor's closet, afraid of going home. A teacher staring blankly at a missing page in his own attendance book. "We are not one thing," it pressed. "We are what they leave behind." The echoes, the fractures, the fears that never spoke, the pain that never healed. We are made of forgetting. Mason took a step back. His breath misted despite the warmth of the air. "Why me?" "Because you remembered." He thought of the crack in the gym floor, the mirror, in the wood, the names no one else could see, his friend forgetting him, his own reflection watching back with eyes that weren't his. All of it had been breadcrumbs, not accidents, not HAUNTINGS. Invitations. Mason looked down at his hands. They trembled, but not with fear, with understanding. He remembered the dreams. He was young, of falling into stairwells that led nowhere, doors that whispered secrets, shadows that clung to him like old regrets. It had been calling him for years. He looked back up at the shape. "So what happens now? Do I disappear? Join you? Replace something?" It pulsed once, almost like a heartbeat. "You don't replace, you remember, and remembering ... is how we survive." The ground under him shifted again, not crumbling, but lifting. The fog peeled back like a curtain. He could see the floorboards above. Light trail light streamed down in broken shafts. Then he saw them, faces in the dark. Hundreds, students, teachers, janitors, people no longer spoken of. Their eyes glowed softly, not with menace, but longing, recognition, gratitude. One of them, man, older man, with a mop and a crooked smile, nodded once. Bellamy Mason closed his eyes. The final whisper wasn't from the creature, it was from inside him. "Don't let them forget again." When he woke, he was lying in the remains of the gym, light pouring in from the broken ceiling. Paramedics hovered. Someone shouted his name. "Mason, hey, he's breathing." He blinked. The world above felt ... thinner, like paper pulled taut ... as They lifted him onto a stretcher. He turned his head, just for a second, and beneath the splintered wood, in the dark where no one else looked, something watched back, not with eyes, but with memory, and in the distance, a voice echoed in his mind like a final call on a forgotten intercom. "Are you still with us, Mason?" He didn't answer, because the truth was, he wasn't sure anymore.
Hello everyone, I'm Ceoz Stories. Thank you for staying with me until the very last moment. If that story gave you chills, made you jump, or simply kept your eyes glued to the screen, don't hesitate to hit the like button to support the channel. Share this video with friends who enjoy these sensations too, and don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts, or even share strange things you've personally experienced, because I'd love to immerse myself in your stories as well. If you're eager to keep exploring untold mysteries, shadows that remain nameless, then subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. A new door will open every day. Are you ready for the next story?